Hello all, my name's Lady Lyndsey Holloway and this is my very first children's story that I've ever written. I tend to write horror stories or fantasy stories for adults, but I thought I'd dip into that magical little world that lives in the back of my brain to bring you something for children. My story, The Librarian and the Lost Prince, centres around a dragon by the name of Margaret. She's not your typical dragon. She does hoard things, as all dragons do, but unlike most, she prefers books over things like treasure or gold. So, let me introduce you to her. Thud! Margaret shot up in her bed, flailing as her duvet caught in her claws, leaving her wrestling with the goose-down octopus trying to drown her while some nameless horror stomped through her home. Finally, she banished the covers from herself, one hand pressed to her chest, her heart thundering so loudly that she was convinced the intruder would be able to hear it. She clamped her jaws together tightly, eyes closed, concentrating on slowing her breathing while her pulse pounded in her ears. Once calm, she swung her legs from the bed, her foot knocking against something hard on her rug. Margaret scowled at the dark object, blinking until her once exceptional eyes rid themselves of the drowsy fuzz that remained. Margaret scowled at the dark object, blinking until her once exceptional eyes rid themselves of the drowsy fuzz that remained, only to remember she needed her glasses to see flipping anything these days. "Oh, goody, I'm going senile," she sighed, retrieving her spectacles from her nightstand and placing them upon her nose. "That's better." Ah! It was Hephaestus's almanac. Margaret had taken the colossal spell book to bed with her. She must have fallen asleep with it and, rolling over, knocked the book onto the floor. So it was the book that had roused her, not some nightmarish beast with 1,000 tentacles looking to steal her soul. However, the duvet seemed willing to fill that nightmare for a moment. Chuckling at her paranoia, Margaret retrieved the book and dusted down the cover with a gentle hand. Clink, thud, hiss! Margaret hiccuped, a plume of smoke rising from each nostril, her eyes fixed on her bedroom's dark and gloomy entrance. Every wall of Margaret's cave home was lined with bookshelves, filled from top to bottom with her hoard, and atop the shelves, and stacked neatly upon the floor beside the shelves. In truth, Margaret was running out of room, but she had plans to extend deeper into the mountain to accommodate her treasures. The problem with having so many bookshelves and no space for her books was that she was seeing figures where she knew there weren't any. But what had made that noise? Margaret swallowed, wincing at the lump that formed in her throat. Then, with the almanac clutched to her chest, she grabbed the pot of cold troll tea on the side table, ready to use it as a weapon if she needed to. Margaret crept silently as she could, sticking to the rug she'd acquired to take away a little of the chill from the stone floors. She snaked her head around the entrance to her bedroom, peering down the corridor into the darkness. Curse her terrible eyesight! Years ago she'd have seen everything as clear as day. Now, even with her spectacles, she couldn't see a flipping thing. "I know it's here. I know it is. I know it's here. I know it is. The oracle said the book was here," a voice hissed, each syllable bouncing off the walls. There was an intruder. Margaret scowled, her fear replaced with annoyance at the audacity. How dare someone come into her home and rifle through her things without her permission? Hephaestus stashed under her arm, wings furled against her back. Margaret pulled herself to her full height and puffed out her chest, slamming her huge tail against the floor with a dull thud that caused the entire cave to shudder. Several books fell from their places, and Margaret silently cursed, her pleasure at the fearful squeal further down the corridor replaced with more annoyance at having caused a mess. Fo, fi, hum! I smell the sweat of a smelly human! Was that the best you could come up with? She sighed, rolling her eyes at herself. Come out, or I'll squash you like an orange. It's your last chance, you horrible... Smorange? Slorange? Oh, for goodness sake, Margaret! Centuries of reading poetry and you chose orange? Oi, little thief! Get out here or I will smash you for trespassing, she snapped, stepping into her study, hands on her hips as she scowled into the shadows, seeking the intruder. Something moved to her right, and Margaret screeched, launching the remnants of troll tea at the little human trying to sneak past her behind a stack of books. The ice-cold, pungent liquid slapped the unsuspecting boy straight in the face, and he stopped dead in his tracks. Margaret watched as the boy's eyes rolled back in his head as the troll tea filled his nostrils, and then he went stiff and fell backwards. "Oh, flip!" Margaret winced as he crashed into one of the stacks of books, scattering them across the floor. "What a fine mess you've made!" she muttered, partly to herself, partly to the unconscious boy. She put down the empty teapot on her desk and curled her tail around the almanac, so that she had both hands free to pick up the poor, wet human. She carried him into the kitchen, placing him in her rocking chair beside the hearth. She tucked a blanket around his shivering frame and relit the now smouldering logs until the fire danced and filled the kitchen with a soft orange glow. "Not troll tea, I think. Honestly, I don't know how you humans go through life without it," she snorted as she filled the kettle and placed it over the fire. Margaret tapped a claw upon her kitchen counter and sighed. In all her centuries, Margaret never encountered anyone trying to sneak into her hoard. Plenty of knights attempted to make a name for themselves by taking her head, but none had even come close. And after a while, they just stopped trying. So what was this little weed looking for? He was a scrawny little thing, all gangly limbs, pale skin, with cuts and bruises barely hidden beneath the bollocks to Bertsy. He was a scrawny little thing, all gangly limbs, pale skin, with cuts and bruises barely hidden beneath the muck and mire of living on the streets. He was the most unlikely thief she'd ever seen, but she had to hand it to him. He'd been bold. He might have got what he'd wanted had he not knocked over the potion book, complete with sample potions for reference and example. Margaret leaned over the boy and poked him with a claw. "What were you looking for, little one?" she asked. His eyes shot open and he went white as a sheet, his reflection looking back at him in Margaret's glasses, which she could see in his eyes. "Wah!" he screamed. "Wah!" Margaret shrieked. "Leave me alone, foul dragon! I'll carve out your heart!" he cried. "Foul? Charming! And good luck. Bigger men with sharper tongues have tried with bigger swords than your non-existent one. I could have eaten you if I'd wanted, but I haven't. So now, what are you doing in my house, and why are you searching through my things?" she demanded. I'm looking for a book, and the oracle told me it would be here." "Most likely. I have the most extensive collection of the written word there is. What book are you looking for, and why?" "A book on noble lineages, because I need to prove I am the legitimate heir to the throne, not my terrible uncle." Margaret's heart broke for the boy as he stared at his hands, twisting the blanket she'd covered him in with his hands. "I take it he's not a good man." The boy shook his head. "Not at all. He killed my father and married my mother while she was pregnant with me. I have her locket and my father's name, but without the book to show a record of my mother being pregnant, I cannot claim the throne. The oracle told me I could find the book here, but I must be quick, as my uncle has been searching your shelves." "He has?" Margaret squeaked. The boy nodded. "How have I never noticed?" "My uncle is a powerful magician. He owns every spell book ever written except Hephaestus's Almanac of Formidable Conjury," Margaret interjected. "How did you know?" "Because there is only one copy, because the book is so dangerous. Because there is only one copy, because the book is so dangerous. And I've only just come into possession of it," she sighed. "That would explain why he hadn't found it here yet, and why he's been so angry of late." "Does he torment you?" Margaret asked. "No," the boy shook his head. "He believes I'm dead, I think, but I returned to the city to try and reclaim my throne from him, which was when the oracle found me and started to help me. She had a vision that my uncle would find the almanac and cast a spell that would twist the world until it did his bidding. He would be the most powerful man in existence. With the almanac, he'd be able to end the world entirely, which was why Hephaestus destroyed most of them before her death. It was in destroying these books that she died, drained her of all her magic to rid the world of even half the volumes made. The rest have killed or maimed many great magical beings over the century. Until this last volume, the one now in my possession. We have to destroy it before my uncle finds it." The boy jumped out from the rocking chair. The boy jumped from the rocking chair, blanket discarded at his feet as he looked up at Margaret, leaning back as far as he could to meet her gaze. No! I don't destroy books. On the contrary, I love them and protect them. Words are precious, she protested. Even the dangerous ones, especially the dangerous ones. I know it might not make sense, but they have a place in this world too, and they deserve to be loved without fear of being used. I'll help you with your uncle. I know every book in this collection, so I can find the one you need to prove your lineage, but we will also need a plan for your uncle. I'm Margaret, by the way. Jocelyn. Prince Jocelyn, I suppose, though only by blood at the minute. The boy said sleepishly. He did, the boy said sheepishly. Well, little prince, we've got work to do. And if you want to find out what happens, you'll have to read the rest of the book.